Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatirons Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatironstuning.com and stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This is episode number 98. We've got Dussex joining us here today, and we've got a special guest on the podcast today. We've got Loni Unser joining us. Now, welcome, Loni, to the podcast. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, and what the reason that the inspiration for me to reach out to you to come on as a guest was seeing you run at Pikes Peak this year. So for the 100th running, you were driving in the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, watched your event, and which was great to see, and wanted to hear all about that. And I want to get there, but I want to maybe start at the beginning, because usually the beginning is, how did you find motorsports? What got you involved? But considering that you're part of the Unser family, I have a suspicion, which may or may not be correct, that motorsports was kind of part of what your family did, or there's a lot of influence around. Is that right? Or
Yeah, I mean, the beginning of racing for me was the beginning of my life. So I grew up going to the Indy 500 with my dad, kind of watching him race. I was only a year or two, but I
Mhm.
was there when he was racing the Indy 500. So it's all I know, really,
Wow.
to an extent. I'll explain a little bit more later, but I can remember as a little kid being put in my dad's Indy car and just looking around thinking this was the coolest thing in the whole world. And since I could remember, I've been in love with the sport.
Do you have a lot of memories from your early childhood of going to races? Like, did you actually go with your dad as he was competing and whatnot?
Yeah, I did. The last race he did, I was about 7 years old, or the last big race he did. I think I was around 7 years old, and I remember it really well. He was racing the 24 Hours of Daytona, and I remember the whole thing. I don't really remember being like watching the race just because I was 7 years old, but
Sure.
still the whole atmosphere. I have a picture of me sitting in his car, the whole nine yards. So it's always been a thing. And what's really cool is for the Unser family being at the racetrack is our family reunion. So every
Wow.
every year, pretty much, we've tried to go to the Indy 500. Missing a few years in between here and there, but we'd go to the Indy 500, see Uncle Al, Uncle Bobby, Al Jr., all of them, and that was our family reunion. That's when I got to see them, and one really cool thing that I remember, and I'd always brag to my friends about this, was Uncle Al gave me a ride around the racetrack in a pace car, in an official IndyCar pace car.
Hmm.
And I just, he was my hero, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the entire world. And I'd go back to school as a little kid, like, haha, I got to ride around Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And they're like, I have no idea what that is,
Right.
but it's really significant. And like a lot of kids don't get that kind of experience. I was super lucky in that, and I had these heroes to look up to.
For sure. But did you always kind of know that you wanted to pursue racing at that point, or is it something that you decided, like, that it wasn't even on your mind at that point, it was something you decided on later?
I always wanted to race, but growing up, I grew up in Idaho, a small ski
Okay.
town in Idaho. It was never really an option for me, and I ski raced as a kid. So we would go on team building activities. We do, like, while we were away on a ski race trip, we our coaches would say, "Hey, let's all go to the go-kart track." And so I'd be like, "Yes, this is my time to shine." So I'd always like kick everybody's butts at the go-kart track as a little kid. And so I always knew I wanted to do it. And I always kind of asked my parents, and I'd always want to go to the races with my dad because he worked and still does work for the Road to Indy. So I'd be at a lot of races growing up, but growing up in Idaho, it was never really a possibility. And then my parents actually discouraged me from going racing, which
Hmm.
uh, is something people don't expect from me as an unser. They know that that this sport is extremely challenging, and the highs are really really high, and the lows are really really low, and it's a huge financial cost. It's really hard to keep finding rides years after years after years, and so they didn't push it at all. But over time, I think they realized I really wanted to do it bad enough, and really had that drive. And eventually, when I was a senior in high school, my dad came to me and said, "Hey, when I was your age, I got to go to a driving school. Let me give you that opportunity. It'll make you a better driver on the street, because really the
Hmm.
fundamentals of being a good race car driver are the fundamentals of good street driving." So I went to the BMW Performance Driving School when I was a senior in high school and fell in love, even more
Hmm.
so than I already had been. And I remember it was a 2 day school. And after the first night, I sat there with my dad and I was like, I need to do this. There's no other option.
That was
This
it.
is going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, he was like, oh gosh, like you could tell the wheels were spinning in his head. And um, kind of the rest is history from there. We came up with a program to run Spec Miata here in the Rocky Mountain region. And kind of, yeah, like I said, the rest is just history.
Yeah. Went from there. I'm curious because ski racing, that there seems to be a lot of drivers that have some history with ski racing, like our owner and driver Scott Crouch. He was a ski racer all the way through college. I mean, are there any parallels? Like, was there anything in lessons that you learned doing that were applicable or, directly or indirectly to driving a car?
100%. Ski racing is all about line finding. And, I remember as a little kid, that's how I learned about apexes, is ski
Mm,
racing, because, you have to think about all that stuff. And uh, so that's a really huge aspect. Another huge aspect is the visualization. So when you're ski racing, usually in GS and slalom, you get to slip the course beforehand. You don't get to run the course beforehand. So all you do, and when I say slipping the course, it just means going through the race course really slowly, just in looking at it and inspecting it. And then from there, it's really important to visualize your race run. So I started learning that at a really young age, that visualization technique, which I now use almost daily when it comes to motorsports. I find that visualization is a huge, huge tool in motorsports. And it's really amazing because I'll run a lap in my head and I'll time it,
hmm,
and it will be almost identical to the lap times I run in real life. And
hmm,
I found that that's really cool. It also really helped leading up to Pikes Peak, because obviously a really, really difficult thing to learn. And so visualization is just plays a huge role in my life as a race car driver.
for sure. What about, I mean, it seems like the mental preparation for ski racing, like I would assume, or my perception of it is that there's a very large mental component to that. Like the kind of like the pre-visualization that you're talking about, but also just being able to, like run a course, but like at a very low speed. And then when you're actually in the gates and you go, now you have to basically officially run the course at full speed. And I mean, that's a crazy transition that, I mean, that's not something that everybody can do. And there's kind of some parallels between that and racing, especially like a race like Pikes Peak, where you basically get to actually run the course one time. You can run pieces of the course and check it out here and there, but you only get one shot at the actual thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to motorsports and any sport like that, which is also like ski racing, being comfortable with being uncomfortable is extremely important,
Hmm,
because racing is never really comfortable. You're never comfortable if you're pushing your limits. And it's a really good thing, to be comfortable with that feeling. And it's the same when you're ski racing. You're at a speed and you're on the limit. Racing is all about being on the limit, and so is ski racing. So that's another really cool parallel that I always like to use.
sure. Well, and so you went and you did this driving school. And what was it that got you? Was it the speed? Was it driving the car? Was it feeling the car kind of like slide or what was it?
You know, it's a feeling like nothing else. You don't get the feeling of driving a car at its limit. Not that I was at at the car's limit when I was first learning, but there's just no feeling like it. And the adrenaline rush and the challenge of it, and the challenge of like getting just a little bit faster every single corner, just it I don't know what it's hard to explain the feeling, but it just really it makes you addicted. And I think a lot of people who race and have driven in any sort of high performance manner really can understand that it is an addiction.
Do you agree? Once you drove at speed, is that what hooked you?
I think I had that teenage angst. I'm sure it as a senior in high school, there's still that teenage angst, but you just want to go fast. Everything's fun, and you just feel like, oh yeah, that's cool. Didn't have like quite the history, but man, once you're part of it, and the more you do it, the more it envelops you, the more you want to do it. Kind of like you're saying, Lonnie, like getting comfortable in that uncomfortable position. It's like an addiction for me. It's like, oh, can I jump that, or can I push myself that next limit? Like I get that for sure too.
Totally. And there's just something so cool about being fully in control of a couple thousand-pound machine. It just like it's so unique. So that's just another thing that I like so much about it, I think.
Well, and it's so much different than normal driving too. Like I mean, the feeling that you get in driving a car at speed on a track, I mean, it almost has no or very minimal similarity to actually like driving from point A to point B. It's a whole different experience of what driving is like.
Right, totally. It's so funny because you talk to people who don't know anything about motorsports or our world in general, and they think it's like driving on the street. I swear, they think we're just kind of out there putting around, and I get it because there's nothing to compare it to really. So it's always cool to see people when they finally realize what it's really about and how challenging it is.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that once you do it, you get it, and you have this whole different perspective, and it's not uncommon that it grabs you when you do.
Yeah, you get the
Yes,
bug.
yes,
That's what
indeed.
my dad always said.
Yep. Well, so once you got the bug, and it sounds like you sat down with your dad and kind of started to put together a plan, and then you started going out and doing the MX5 Cup. Is that right?
I started off racing Spec Miata, which is
Oh,
a
Spec
little bit
Miata. Okay.
different. Yeah, more at a club level, and I raced in the Rocky Mountain region, which was great because I was going to school out here. I went to the University of Colorado Boulder,
Hmm.
and so it was just perfect. We'd race at tracks like High Plains Raceway, Colorado Springs, Pikes Peak International Raceway, and all of those things.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably
Dussex
out
is
your door.
actually there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
Oh,
there
no
right
way.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so great. And it was really cool because we had a really competitive Spec Miata field. And so that just made me grow as a driver. And it made my racecraft grow so tremendously within the first year that I did it. It was the perfect way to start off my racing career.
Yeah. There's a saying in racing, or at least we've talked about here, that Miata is always the answer. So it
Yeah,
doesn't matter what the question is, but it's a good way to get into wheel-to-wheel racing. The car it's a very similar set of cars, so it really is a series that kind of forces you almost to develop as a driver versus developing the car. Trying to find ways to make the car faster, you have to make the driver faster. Was
right.
that
Absolutely.
was that your
Yeah,
experience?
yeah, totally. I mean, it's so underrated, but it's so great. People who know. I remember when I decided I was going to go race Spec Miata, I showed a picture of the car to one of my friends, and they laughed at me, and I was like, "No, it's cool, I swear." And I really just proved that after years of racing Spec Miata, it's just like some of the best racing out there in the world. It's so close, and you're bump drafting, and it teaches you just so much about momentum. If you make a single mistake while you're racing Spec Miata, you're getting freight trained by like five cars, maybe more. It's a horrible feeling. So it teaches you not to make mistakes, to drive the car on the limit, and just, get everything you can out of it. And again, that momentum is really important in Spec Miata.
Can you
So
can you say a little bit, just like explain in a little bit more detail why that's the case? Why if you make one mistake, why you would lose so many positions in a Spec Miata?
yeah, I mean, it's such close racing, which is part of where it comes from. The second, it's a spec series. So it's all the cars are supposed to be almost identical. You can do stuff to the setup, but it's very minimal. So it's all about the driver. It's all about who's behind the wheel, and it really because it's such tight racing, such big fields, that's kind of what happens. If you make a little mistake, it's just you get dragged back, because then you don't have any power to then kind of recover from that mistake.
It's because the racing is so close, and one little, like putting the car a little bit out of position or making one wrong move loses you just enough of that momentum that just everybody just goes right
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's a
those
perfect
four
way
or
to say
five
it.
people that come around you didn't make the mistake, and that's just that
Right.
hair of a difference right there.
And there's nothing more frustrating, because you're just like, really, why did I do that? But it's
Yeah.
exactly. But that's what makes it so cool, is it really forces you to be precise, which going up through driving more in different cars, it's like, it's the most important thing about racing is just being precise. And it's a game. My dad always says it's a game of inches. You know, you have to be right on every single time, every single lap, every single run.
And maybe just expand a little bit on what you mean by being precise. Just because I think that might be something that maybe is just not as clear to people. You know, you're driving around the course, you're all driving around the same course. How much of a difference can it make if you're taking a little bit of a different line to somebody else? Does it really make that much of a difference?
It does make that much of a difference, especially when the cars are so close and the racing is tight. You can go into a corner, and if you brake a foot later than somebody else, it can either be a disaster, or it can make it so you it can make it so you win that corner, whether
Right.
it's time, whether it's for position, whatever it is. And then when it comes to just driving line and whatnot, sometimes, like, if you're off by just a little bit, it can have the potential to upset the car enough that bad things happen. Like, you may take too much curb. And when I say take too much curb, just meaning use too much curbing, it upsets the car just enough that it causes the car to do all kinds of different things depending on what kind of car you're driving. So really, when it comes to everything, you have to be very precise about your brake marker, your turn-in point, your apex, your track exit, really everything. And that's what makes it so cool, is to kind of strive for that perfection. Because when you're driving a car at the absolute limit of grip, if you're slightly off of where you should be, then the car won't be able to handle it.
Right. And how did you develop that skill to be able to, I mean, kind of what you're describing there is to be able to replicate a lap, like probably drive or stay within a very close lap time, and do the same thing over and over again, so you can run consistent lap times to hopefully stay in your position or make up positions.
Right. It just, like anything, it just takes a ton of practice. And, I'm super lucky that I get to be an instructor. So I do teach at really cool driving schools like the AMG Driving Academy, and like for the BMW Performance Center. And if you go to one of those schools, you know that the one thing we talk about the most is your eyes. And your eyes are the most important thing when you're driving and looking ahead. Because when you're going that much faster, your eyes have to go ahead, because it slows things down for you. When you're walking down the street, you don't have to look very far ahead because you're not moving very fast. But as soon as you're moving faster than what your body's used to, you have to build that discipline to look further and further ahead. And so really, a huge thing is developing the discipline in your eyes to make sure that you're a better driver. And it takes a lot of practice. It feels very unnatural. And I work with a lot of people who are beginners, and it is just something that's very unnatural. And it's still something, every single time I'm in the car, I tell myself, look ahead, look ahead. It's like, you can almost guarantee that I'm saying that in my mind. So that's a huge thing. And then just building the discipline of knowing what's coming up, and working on having markers. So when I say markers, it's like sticking to a brake marker very religiously. If you stick to a brake marker and you say, I'm going to brake at this tree, and you brake too early and you realize that you're not carrying enough speed through that corner, then you're like, okay, I can brake 2 feet later than that tree. You build it up in very, very small, maybe not 2 feet, but you build it up in very, very small increments.
Right.
And you're very disciplined with those markers. And then you have your turn-in marker. So where you start turning with steering wheel for the corner, and then you have your apex marker and your track exit marker. So these markers are just really, really important to build consistency in racing. And I think it's a huge skill that anybody can have, is just being consistent lap to lap to lap.
For sure. For sure. Well, and then the other component of that, I would imagine, is racecraft. So you've got to find the way to consistently drive the car around the track to be fast, to do consistent lap times. But you're also out there, in Spec Miata with a bunch of other cars. How challenging was that?
I mean, it's some of my favorite part of racing and driving is the racecraft aspect of it. It's so fun. It's like a high-speed game of chess. I'm sure that's been said before. It really is. It's like, how can you outsmart the people that you're driving against? And it also comes with being precise. When you're racing somebody, you have to think about everything, because these markers that I just talked about may change a little bit. And you have to be aware that because where you're placed on the track, you may have to brake a little bit earlier, or maybe you can brake a little bit later, depending on where you are and who you're side to side with and things like that. And there's just no other feeling of going 100 plus miles an hour, like within inches of another car. And it's just so cool. And bump drafting is super fun. Really cool to be able to use that team strategy aspect and be able to bump draft your teammate or whatever, use it to your advantage. Obviously, in a lot of series, you can't bump draft, but I've been lucky enough that I've gotten in some series where you can. And it's so cool. I love the racecraft element of it, and it takes a lot to build up. It's really hard to build your toolbox of different moves you can make and different things and ideas, and you always have to be kind of willing to shift and move what you're going to do. But you also try to plan your moves ahead of time, and you also have to kind of analyze, okay, this guy, John or whatever, does this, and I'm faster in this corner than John, but he's faster in this other corner than John. But then Sarah is faster there and there. So you have to realize who you're driving against too, which is kind of cool, because
analyze what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're in a full season with people, you can really understand who does what, when, and where. And it's really cool to kind of build that over time, and really try to figure out who you're racing against and use that to your benefit, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Well, in Dust we've talked about that. I think when you and Toss were talking about running lemons and how you were able to make up or lose less time in traffic than he was, and kind of came out that it was like how you maneuvered the car around traffic versus how he was maneuvering around traffic. Which do you like? Do you like the racecraft element, like getting around cars, or do you like trying to just find be pinpoint perfect to find the maximum time around the track?
I think it's kind of both. I mean, some tracks, and Loni, you race at High Plains, so you can certainly speak to it as well. But High Plains is like, there's so many lines at High Plains, and sure, there's like the ultimate fast guy line or whatever, but there's so much room to actually make moves and maneuvers. And I haven't been fortunate enough to race any spec racing, but like when you're in situations in enduros and you got time, you could see the guy that you're coming up on or the other person that you're coming up on, and kind of plan your moves. You're like, all right, that guy does this, or that person does that. And if he does that again, I'm in there. And if he does something different, I'm not in there. And I was actually kind of laughing, thinking about the idea of how we're always taught to be predictable. If you're going to pass somebody, be predictable. If you're doing time trials, be predictable. Be that predictable guy on track. But I was actually kind of just listening to you talking, Loni. I was thinking, like, sometimes it's like that poker game where you're like, you know what, I got this ace up my sleeve, and that time you thought you were going to make that move on me, not this time. And so sometimes that kind of happens. And I wonder, in that racecraft idea, I mean, with the track like High Plains where you can drive so many of the lines versus like a track like, I mean, you ran St. Pete. There's not like a bunch of line options to St. Pete. There's like a line, and then there's a wall, and then there's the marbles, it look like there's a lot of options out there. So you're really holding that one ace up your sleeve where you thought I was predictable, and then you make this move, and you gave me an opportunity to make a move. It's kind of interesting. I don't know, like listening to you talk about it and just it's fascinating for sure. I mean, you're higher, way higher levels.
Well, and I think that is another aspect. Like there's maneuvering a car and going fast that grabs you. But then like once you start doing wheel to wheel, that could certainly be something that grabs you too.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like I said, just racing inches from people. There's no feeling like it, and just the sensation you get is unreal. And it's cool because sprint racing is a lot different than endurance racing, but both have a lot of strategy within themselves. So kind of before I was talking a little bit of sprint racing, and you guys kind of mentioned endurance racing, which I also am super lucky that I've gotten a lot of opportunities in endurance racing, and being fast through traffic is huge. It is so important in endurance racing to be able to navigate the traffic, to be able to navigate the slower cars, and then be able to have the fast cars not pass you in places that are really going to hurt your lap times, which is something I don't think is thought about enough. Like, oh, well, people may think, oh, well, fast cars will pass you wherever fast cars will pass you. But the case is really, you kind of have to be strategic where you let them pass and where you don't, because you don't want to give up their lap. And then it's their job to, pass you where it's going to be most beneficial to them. And that's why it's a chess game. That's what makes it so cool. And it's really not an easy skill to be fast through traffic. It's really, really challenging, but it's super fun. And you can see a car way ahead of you and plan out, okay, I'm going to pass them here because I'm here right now. And you can just kind of plan it and calculate it in your head as you're going. And it's just like, it's so different and so fun. And it's different than sprint racing, which I love sprint racing so much, but that is an aspect of endurance racing that I think is so cool.
For sure. And that's one of the cool things about motorsports is there's so many different ways you can race a car. There's all
Totally.
these different disciplines that you can explore and develop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's endless. You can race dirt, you can race rally, it's so cool because it's
Yeah,
endless. But then also the fundamentals always remain the fundamentals. It's all about car control.
yeah,
To be a good driver, I think in anything, you have to be really great at the basics. And that's why the greats are who they are, is because they could run anything. They could be put in anything and be fast.
sure, sure. Well, and let's move forward to when you started running in the MX5 Cup because that's where you moved into running with a more let's just call it a bit of a larger team. Is that right?
Yeah, MX5 Cup is, for what it's worth, considered pro racing. Racing is so different because really the only thing in racing that makes it pro versus not pro is the budget.
Hmm.
Because as soon as you step into pro racing, the budget just climbs exponentially.
Yeah,
So it's kind of motorsports has its fallbacks when it comes to that kind of thing. But also MX5 Cup was really cool because it did take pretty much all of the best Spec Miata drivers from around the country, and a lot of people went to the MX5 Cup. And that's what made it so cool, is it was just Spec Miata on steroids. In terms, the cars were a little bit faster. The cars were certainly quite a bit harder to drive than the Spec Miatas. I drove a 1999 Spec Miata, and then obviously the MX5 Cup is the brand new MX5, Mazda MX5. And I was surprised with how different they are to drive. They're both insanely fun to drive, but the MX5, the ND2 car actually, is just quite a bit. It's a little bit twitchy, like it's a
hmm.
little bit unpredictable, and it does this thing where when you're driving it, you want it to take a set, but before it takes a set, it likes to slide quite a bit before it takes that set.
Hmm.
And when I say set, it means really just when the car sticks. And it's really hard for people to get that feeling of letting the car slide a little bit because they feel like the car is going to get out of control, but it'll slide just a little bit and then set, which is really cool and unique and fun about those cars. And it's what makes those cars really difficult to drive really fast. They're
Hmm.
easy to drive fast, but very difficult to drive really fast.
Is that because there's just a little bit of an unpredictable element to it? Like it feels like it's going to set in and give you the grip in the corner, but maybe it doesn't do it every single time.
Yeah, exactly. That's really what it is. And it also, just like Spec Miata, it's all about carrying that momentum, and it's the same thing. If you make a single mistake, you're getting freight trained, and it's horrible. It
Right.
happened to me when I was racing the MX5 Cup. I remember getting freight trained down the front straight and just like kicking myself.
Hmm.
But also again, like that's what makes it so fun.
Do you feel like, and it sounds like your experience in Spec Miata really did set you up to be as successful as possible in that MX5 Cup.
Right, absolutely. I think if you can drive a Spec Miata fast and an MX5 fast, any of these momentum cars fast, it sets you up really, really well for driving fast cars fast. Because, people talk about Spec Miata being momentum cars, which is true, they are. But in my opinion, every single race car is a momentum car.
Mm,
It's,
yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of people say, oh, rely on the power, but no, when you're driving a fast car fast, you have to take those elements that you learned in Spec Miata to then go drive this other car faster than the other guy.
Right.
So I don't know, that's been a cool realization that I've made going up through this sport. And it just, like I said, I really do think if you can drive a Spec Miata fast, you can drive just about anything fast.
So it sounds like you would agree that Miata is always the answer.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, and we should mention that that team was Hixon Motorsports. Is that right?
Yes,
Yes.
Hixon Motorsports was absolutely incredible. I got to be teammates with some really cool people like Celine Roland, who is just wicked fast, and I got to work with Shay Holbrook, who was the team manager, which was really really cool, because it's really neat to see women in those kind of roles in motorsports. So overall, it was just an incredible experience, and just the team was my family, like most of my teams are, but Hixon really, really embraced me and was there for my success. And it just was such a cool team and such a cool experience.
So when you became a part of that team and ran, I think how many was it, a season and a half, 2 seasons, or a few seasons?
It was I raced a season with Hixon, and 2 years prior, I raced two race weekends with a team called Six Sideways, who no longer was in the Mazda MX5 Cup in 2021. So I guess season and a quarter.
Okay, okay. Well, so when you're running that season with Hickson and you've got somebody like these other drivers and Shea Holbrook that can kind of mentor you, is it something where you came in with a lot of experience and you were kind of set up for success, but then they were kind of able to really guide you, or were you kind of left like to kind of do your best and just they were there if you had questions, or how did that work?
No, they 100% guided me, just like they guided Celine, who was winning races at the time. We had Shay, who obviously she has a tremendous background in motorsports and has raced a ton herself and is a very, very good driver. And then Andrew Carbonell was our coach, our dedicated coach. And so we'd sit down after every single time out on track with Andrew, going over every single detail and working on setup and working how to find a tenth in each corner, and just working on the minor details. And I'd have like 3 hour long conversations with Andrew about how to get faster, and it was really cool because we really really dove into every single detail. And that was one thing that I absolutely loved about that team, is everyone was so passionate about it on that team, and we all wanted a lot of success, and it really showed because Hixon has had a ton of successes and they had a killer season last year. So just really really great experience.
That's awesome. Getting plugged into that kind of environment, did that kind of help you take your driving to the next level?
100%. Like I said, we're focusing on every detail. So I just became so much of a better driver that season. And getting to race against some really, really fast guys was really cool. And again, you had to be inch perfect, and um, learning racecraft even more at a higher level than I did racing Spec Miata, because at this level, they're not going to let you get away with things, like the person
Right.
you're racing, they've been there, done that. So they know what works, what doesn't, kind of thing. Um, they know, okay, well, it's just a whole different level. It's just,
Yep.
you can tell it's crazy. And, making a single little, not even mistake, but when you're making a pass, if you're not within a couple inches of the car that you're passing, then it leaves the car that you're passing more of an opportunity. And so it's just like very minor details that you have to pay attention to, even more so than when I was racing Spec Miata. So it just made me really, really a good driver. And we'd watch every single race back. I've watched every race back multiple times, analyzing what I did, what I could do different, what I would do next time in that situation, maybe what I did good too. And race starts were just crazy intense. Like you could not leave a gap, like you couldn't leave the door open. You really had to have your elbows up, so to speak.
Right.
You couldn't let anybody get away with anything.
Wow. So it sounds like you had a lot of good guidance, and you were spending just a lot of time doing a lot of homework and really analyzing every aspect of your driving at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I spent hours and hours every week watching video, going through data, driving on the simulator. I'm super lucky. I have a Rick Motec simulator, so I get to drive that as much as my heart desires,
Right.
and which is a really, really good tool because not only does it help you learn tracks, but then also when it came to racecraft and wanting to get better at racecraft, you can hop on the sim and race against people and learn different aspects of racecraft, learn, just everybody's going to do something slightly different. So the more experiences you get racing against people, the more you'll learn and the more you'll be prepared for things.
That's really interesting. How much did you like when did you start using the sim, and how much would you say how much like did you use it a little bit at the beginning and use it more now, or did you use it more at the beginning and less now?
Um, I use it more now, I would say, just because at the beginning, the simulator does have its disadvantages in that sometimes it doesn't have a racetrack you're going to, but, that's not really a huge deal. But yeah, I definitely started to realize more and more as my career has gone on how valuable of a tool it can be, because really it's so huge. I mean, I have some friends who have gotten their start in racing on the simulator, and
Hmm.
they were very competitive on the simulator, and that afforded them opportunities in a real car. And they did almost just as well or even better in the real car than they did in the sim.
Okay.
So it's amazing how much it can translate. And just we always talk about seat time,
Hmm.
as racing drivers, as anybody in the sport talks about seat time, and it's a really great tool to get more seat time. And
Yeah.
again, not everything translates 100% to each other, but it's pretty close. But you have to realize, okay, well, so for example, racing the MX5 Cup, I practice on the simulator a lot at Road Atlanta in the MX5 Cup, um, in the simulator, and through turn 12 at Road Atlanta, which is this fast right-hand sweeper down a hill. It's a really, really cool corner. It was really easy flat in the simulator, but in real life, not so much.
Oh no.
so
Okay.
so you can't always just go straight from the simulator to real life and say, oh, I can do everything exactly the way I did it in the sim. It would be foolish to think that, because trust me, I've been there, I've done that, I've made that mistake. So you have to take everything, you use it as a reference and use it as a
Hmm.
guide, saying, okay, well, in the simulator I could brake at this point. Let me try to brake a little bit earlier the first lap, see how it goes. And then you can say, okay, we'll build off that and build off. It's a
Right.
tool to build off of, basically.
Sure. Yeah, it's very interesting that that is such a big part of, well, you were able to use that tool so much. It's something that it's really cool that it is as accessible now as it is, and it used to be something that only like the pro race teams used to have.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I talk to people who are just getting into the sport, I tell them there's no excuse to go to a track and not know it.
Mm,
Um, you can't, it would just be foolish to show up and, be learning the track. And like I said, sometimes the tracks aren't always on the simulator, but using video is a huge, huge help as well. If you have a simulator and the racetrack isn't on the simulator, you can go to video and use video. And then how I do that is I watch a ton of video, and then from that video, I start to visualize. And that's what really gets me prepared. The simulator really helps that process because it makes it a bit easier in my mind. Sometimes watching video can be a little bit difficult, but the more you do it, the more used to it you'll get.
Sure. Well, and so that brings an obvious question. Was Pikes Peak in the simulator?
It was on Assetto Corsa, which
Yep.
Is a little bit different than iRacing. I personally prefer iRacing, just because it's very, very accurate in my opinion. So Pikes Peak, I relied heavily on video. I use the sim, but I put my time and focus into the video. But actually, that's a lie. The thing that helped me with Pikes Peak the most is I live in Boulder, Colorado. So I was super lucky that I had a home track advantage. So leading up to the race, months before, I'd go to Pikes Peak and I would just drive it up and down,
Sure.
which I do believe for that race is the best way to learn the road. Because, there's things in video and things on the sim that you're just not going to be able to pick up, like references. There's trees that may not be in the simulator. There's rocks. There's, some corners are a bit more on camber than what you see in the video or on the sim. And so honestly, just going up there and driving it back and forth every day with the tourists was really helpful to me. And that's, obviously not feasible for everybody, but something I'd recommend to somebody who wants to run Pikes Peak is take that time, invest that time, even if it's a couple times before you start running on the mountain, go up and just drive.
Go up and down, spend a day.
Yep. It's aggravating because the tourists drive very slowly. And
yes.
And it has a makes you want to rip your hair out, but very low.
Yeah.
But even with that low speed limit, I do believe that was the thing that helped most with Pikes Peak.
Well, and how did you decide that you wanted to run the Pikes Peak Hill Climb? I mean, that's you've done a lot of racing, but I mean, Pikes Peak is kind of a whole different animal. How did you decide that you wanted to pursue this?
It's funny. Obviously, all my family has run Pikes Peak, and all my family has had a great success on Pikes Peak. And so it was always something when I started racing that people would ask me about. And to be honest, it would make me a little nervous because I did not want to race Pikes Peak. I just was like, nope, I'm afraid of heights. I don't want to do it, which is really quite funny. But I guess the first little bit, how it started, which almost made me not want to do it even more, was I was racing at the Speedway in Colorado Springs, Pikes Peak International Speedway, and my dad had come out for that race I was like, hey, can you take me up Pikes Peak just nice and slowly as a tourist, whatever, because I want to hear about your experiences. I want to see it just firsthand because it is so prevalent in my history. And of course, my dad was like, sure thing, no problem. And we get to the W's and I am looking down the cliff sides like, I don't think I can ever do this. This is horrifying. Right. Dad, what were you thinking? This is crazy. You were out of your mind. And he looked at me and he told me, he's like, Loni, when you're racing, all you focus on is the road. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. That's a bunch of BS. And then last year, I didn't have anything going on, and the race happened to be going on that Sunday. And I was like, whatever, I'll just go. I'll see what it's all about. See what this Pikes Peak stuff is all about. And I went as a spectator in 2020. And that's when I really started to understand. I was like, oh, this is actually so cool. Like, these people are just roaring up the mountain in beautiful cars on this beautiful mountain, which is really the combination of the two things I love the most, is being in the mountains and racing cars. And there's really no other place to do that like Pikes Peak. And so that day I was like, even though it still made me a little bit nervous, I was like, that day I'm like, okay, I know what I'm doing in 2021 on this day.
Wow.
And so it was kind of history from then on. I started to put it together, and it's funny because really the first run I got on practice, I was like, I meant to be here. This is what I meant to be doing. It felt really natural to me. It just felt like nothing else, so cool. And you know, it was just really special for me because going through all of the process to get there of, oh, I'm afraid, oh, this might be really cool, oh my gosh, this is so cool, was really, really neat. And to have it on the 100th running was just the coolest thing that I could have asked for, and definitely the coolest experience of my life. I will say though, the first run, crossing the yellow lines, I felt like I was doing something wrong. It was kind of a weird feeling. And then you also feel your ears pop on your way up, which of course you never do in a regular race car. And so just like a bunch of little things about Pikes Peak is what makes it so unique and so cool.
I'm just curious because you have a father and a family that have raced this race, and you said that they were a little bit hesitant, especially at the beginning, to encourage you to get into racing. Once you kind of approached them and said that this is something you wanted to do, was there any hesitation there, or were they 100% supportive of you doing it?
I think when it came to Pikes Peak, they were 100%. My dad was 100% supportive, and so was my mom. Because, and I think that's really because they knew that if I didn't do it, I'd be asked about it my entire career, which is probably true. And you know, obviously my dad ran it, so he knows, you know, he knew to give me the right mentorship to make sure that it all went well. So you know, I think he was excited about it, and I could tell throughout the whole week he was very nervous, but it was a very cool experience to share with him.
Was it something where I'm guessing that it was a good experience where he was able to kind of mentor you through that experience too? I mean, that would be a pretty amazing experience to have a father that's able to offer that kind of insight.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we talked about it a lot leading up to it. And his experience was a little different because when he ran it on dirt. So it's not like we could really dissect a line and things like that together. But really dissecting strategy together is what we did. And he told me, he's like, Loni, this, even more so than road racing, this is a thinking person's game. Like you have to think about everything. He said thinking man's, but I say thinking person, but it doesn't matter.
Yep.
And he's like, this, you have to think about everything. And because this road is very unpredictable, and you have to be so precise because, you know, you don't have those like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 brake markers in every corner. You don't have whatever. So you have to think about every corner and make sure that you know every corner really well. And that was one thing that was super important to me going to Pikes Peak as a rookie was I refused to make a mistake and end up in a bad situation simply because I didn't know the road. I know that is the one thing that can really get people into trouble at Pikes Peak is simply not knowing the road, because there are several corners on the mountain that look really similar to each other. Yep. And so I was like, that's not going to happen to me. And so that's why I drove up a ton of times and spent time on the sim and spent time watching video. And that was really helpful. And it was helpful to talk to my dad about that because he could tell me some of the corners that people tend to make mistakes on because of not knowing where they are. And, you know, it's 156 corners. It's like, it's a lot.
That's a lot.
So it's a lot to piece together, but it's pretty cool because Pikes Peak is really divided up into 3 sections in terms of driving style of each section. They do that in testing and practice is you run each section each day. So first day of testing, you'll run the bottom section. Second day of testing, you'll run the middle. Third, you'll run the top, or in whatever order. It doesn't matter. But it's cool because the sections that they're broke into are really there's specific characteristics of each section. Like The first section is pretty fast and pretty flowy and nice and smooth. Obviously, a lot of trees. There's a lot of brake references, apex references, things like that. The middle section is really unique because it's pretty short, but it's like a race between hairpins. So you go fast.
This is the W's you're talking about.
Yeah, the W's,
Yep.
which is actually nice because obviously that part of the road is the most visually intimidating, but it's actually the easiest part of the road. So that's cool about the middle section. And the middle section is just so iconic for Pikes Peak. That's what people see when they see pictures of Pikes Peak. So I love each section in its own way. And then the upper section is just wickedly fast, wickedly bumpy with no references. So the fast is kind of evil, but it's fun evil. Like it's such a challenge, the top. So it's cool to put them all together and really start to learn them in terms of their sections. And I was really lucky that I was coached by Jeff Swart, who's raced on the mountain for, I think, 20 years now, which is absolutely mind-boggling. And not only raced on the mountain for 20 years, but really succeeded on the like is a legend up there. And so he would take us up every day and he would talk about the sections, and he had a very specific method in coaching and learning the track, and it was very methodical. And he knows every rock and every bush on that mountain. It's wild to me, his knowledge. And so that was really cool to have Jeff as a coach and a mentor. And it was just such a great experience.
For sure. I'm curious. I mean, because you come from running Spec Miata into MX5, and that feels like a natural progression. And now you're running Pikes Peak. Did you feel like you were prepared? Did you feel like this was a natural progression, or was this something where it felt more like you were kind of having to start over and kind of learn new skills or whatnot to run this race?
It was absolutely a natural progression, because Pikes Peak is cool that people can come from all sorts of different racing backgrounds and succeed up there. But for me, it was really great because you just go back to the fundamentals and you break down every corner. And, it's all about being precise, like I said. And it's, building that precision through my race career. I don't think I could have ever done Pikes Peak any earlier than I did it. I think it came at the perfect time because I've gotten to a place where I'm confident with my consistency and basically just my whole ability to run it and analyze it and learn it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. So Dussex, I think it's fair to say that you have designs on running the Pikes Peak Hill Climb.
Yep.
Yes. So, all right, but you've never done it before. So, as somebody that is thinking about actually doing this, what question, like, what are you thinking? What do you want to ask Loni about her experience?
I mean, I'm more worried about building a car and trying to drive it and do the sim and all at the same time. But I really like hearing the feedback because when you were in Boulder, that was still a 2-hour drive down here. For me, it's like 24 minutes. So it's really confidence inspiring, thinking like, okay, if I can get some seat time up there, get the GoPros mounted, drive it a bunch, go through it and look at it and stuff. I don't know. I'm excited about it. And I've had kind of those moments, we talk about racing being highs and lows, and sometimes it's a depressing man's sport or a depressing people's sport because sometimes when you get to the top, you're like, I never thought I would get here. What's next? And I've definitely had some of those moments earlier this year, like, man, this is like, you can't think about dying on it, but this is something that you could do that it could really get you. And you can't think about it like that. And so it's awesome to just see just how spry and fun you are and about, it was sick. Like, that was awesome. It's awesome to do it. And I don't know, it just gets me more pumped about it and a little bit more calming too. So I appreciate that from your perspective. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you should be pumped about it. It is like, do it. It's the coolest thing that I've ever done. And I've been lucky. I've gotten to do cool things. So like on a scale of really neat things. And it's just, there's nothing like it and nothing else like it. And even just like the fans at Pikes Peak, everybody's so stoked to be up there. And what I found that was also really cool about it was, on that same vein, everybody is willing to help each other, which sometimes I find can be a little bit different in road racing, especially like more road racing, as people kind of hold their cards close to their chest because it's so competitive. But at Pikes Peak, it's really you against the mountain, and I think everybody wants success for each other because it is so high stakes. It is, like you said, it can bite back, and it certainly does. So it's just the camaraderie beyond or amongst competitors and amongst people who are organizing the event, people who are working the event, just everything. It's such a unique feeling, and there's such like a buzz in the air. And what I think is so cool is like you can get teams that have these huge efforts, like $1 million efforts, but then you can get more like grassroots racing teams or smaller teams. Like I was I was racing in the Porsche Trophy by Yokohama class, so I had a bunch of people to rely on, but I was really a one-man team. It was me and my crew guy, and every day. But then you get together and you work with everybody, and it's just so cool. So it's unlike anything else. So you got to do it.
Yeah.
And I'll root for you, and hopefully I'll be up there myself.
Well, yeah, that was
taunts me every day. Every morning I wake up, it's still out there. It hasn't gone anywhere.
It's not one of those mountains that moves location. It's a shame.
Yeah.
It is a shame.
If
no
it
tectonic plates that I'm aware of.
If it could move around just so that the weather was a little bit more stable, man, that would be nice.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing too.
Yeah. Well, and so I guess the last question I have for you, Loni, would you do it again, or are you going to do it again?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's
Okay.
no question in my mind. It's all about finding funding, as that's our hardest thing as a racing driver, to find funding. But I am pursuing it for many years to come, and hopefully can maybe be the first queen of the mountain. You never know.
Absolutely. That'd be very cool.
Yeah.
We'll all be rooting for you, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
First, Loni, I just want to say, thank you again for making the time to come on and chat with us. And as we're winding down here, I did want to ask you about a group that you're part of called Shift Up Now, which, kind of along the lines of basically getting more women involved in motorsports and helping kind of put the pieces together to make these efforts happen. Can you talk a little bit about what that group is and what it does?
Yeah, I'm really grateful to be a part of Shift Up Now. Basically, at its core, it's to inspire confidence and courage in women in racing. But also, it is to inspire confidence and courage in everyone as well. What I really like about Shift Up Now is we're really pushing the thought that men and women can work together in racing and really excel. It can be an all-female team, whatever, but it's not necessarily about that. I think all female teams are really cool, and I hope to be a part of them one day. But the point is that it doesn't matter who's behind the wheel, who's working on the car, whatever it is, we can all be successful together, and that's what I think is so cool. And the way that we kind of emulate that in Shift Up Now is through our membership program. So anybody can pay to be a member of Shift Up Now. Doesn't matter if you're old, young, man, woman, doesn't matter. You can pay to be a part of Shift Up Now, and then you get access to a bunch of really cool webinars we do. So we'll do a bunch of webinars like data in racing, how to analyze data in racing at the highest level, or at a lower level, just how to get into racing. And then, we have a lot of partnerships. Like we work pretty heavily with Saybelt, which is pretty cool, and other companies that members can get access to discounts through. So we're really just doing a bunch of cool things, and, really trying to pave the way for women in motorsports. And we kind of do this through a core group of athletes. And I'm lucky enough to be one of the Shift Up Now athletes alongside Pippa Mann, Sarah Montgomery, and just a ton of really, really cool women, and women in all disciplines too. Like we have some girls in NASCAR, some drift girls, and so it's really neat to be a part of, and just I've honestly made some of my best friends through Shift Up Now, which is really cool. And it's cool that we're all supporting each other and then supporting young girls as well. If I ever get a young girl come up to me and ask me for advice, I love to give girls in motorsports advice on how they can excel and succeed in this sport.
Very cool. And if we'll put up something for those watching at home, but there's a lot of members of the Shift Up Now group doing a lot of different racing. And one of the things that I really like is that there's a saying, or maybe it's one of the mottos of the group, which is if she can see her, she can be her, which is kind of just like being out there, being present. You all doing what you do. Those little girls that are watching this. I mean, it gives them a role model to follow, and shows that if she can do it, maybe I can do it too.
Yeah, and it's really cool for me to hopefully be that for some people, because I had women who were that for me when I was growing up. So, like I said, my dad would always take me to the races because he worked for the Road to Indy. And at the time, Simona Di Silvestro was in the Road to Indy. And I remember meeting her, and she was just like, I was like, man, like, she's one of the only women in the field, but she's racing just as hard as the guys. Like, I want to do that. I want to be that. So, yeah, I just hope to be that for young girls as well, and hope to be that role model and somebody to look up to.
How important is having a role model to look up like that? I mean, how impactful can that be?
It's huge. I just remember for me, it being so important, and especially, I think it's also really helpful to be able to get advice from other women in the sport too. So, is the more we can support each other, the more women we're going to see in the sport and competing as equals. Because the one thing that I love about motorsports, and the one thing that's so unique about it, is the car doesn't know who's behind the wheel, so it doesn't matter. So that, I just think that's one of the things I love about this sport. And yeah, just hoping to see more and more women get into it.
Very cool. It seems like there's been more women involved, just in general, just generally speaking, and it seems like there's a little bit of an upswell happening, and I hope it just continues. It's
Yeah,
great to
so do
see.
I. Yeah, there's definitely more and more women excelling in the sport, and definitely a huge push from teams and manufacturers. Kelly Moss is doing a shootout, an all-female shootout, next week at Putnam Park in Indianapolis, and I'm a part of that. So I'm really
Cool.
excited to drive that 911 GT3 Cup car next week. So it's just, so many people are being so supportive of women in the sport, and it's so great to see.
For sure. Well, as we're winding down, Dussex, any last questions or anything that you wanted to ask Loni?
I think it's super cool. I'm really impressed by you and just everybody who takes the sides in this day and age to wake up and identify as a race car driver and then see it all the way through is sick. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm really pumped for you, and I'm pumped to do the same. So
Yeah, totally. I'm so excited to see what you do with Pikes Peak and where you go as well.
Yeah. So Loni, I mean, maybe what's on your horizon? You said you're doing this shootout. I mean, is there anything like where are your eyes set? What are some of your long-term goals?
Yeah, my ultimate goal would be to race in the IMSA WeatherTech series. I find, open wheel is really, really cool. And I would love to get into open wheel racing. I'm actually testing an F4 car coming up in November that I'm
Cool.
really excited about. It'll be my first time in an open wheel car, so I think I'll be addicted to that as well, unfortunately. But sports car racing for me right now is the goal. Obviously, if anybody was to come to me and say, Loni, hey, race a sprint car, race a NASCAR, race whatever, I would jump on it because to me, racing is racing. I love all forms of racing, and want to do it all, quite honestly. But at some point, you have to pick something and have that goal in the future to work towards. So yeah, doing that and then going to that shootout, which will be super awesome. Thankful to Kelly Moss. It's really cool because it's a female team owner. Her name's Victoria Thomas, and she is just so cool. And it's really cool to see. And Kelly Moss is one of the most well-known teams in Porsche racing. So to see her excel the way she does in her role is super cool. And I'm excited to work with her. And I get to compete against my best friends, which will be interesting. But Saber Cook, Sarah Montgomery, and Aurora Strauss are also finalists. So that'll be super neat. And then hopefully racing Pikes Peak again next year.
Very cool. That'll be awesome. And definitely, hopefully we'll see you next year. Do you think you'll do the Porsche Cup again, or do you think you might do something a little bit more wild and out of the box?
Probably not anything anybody would be surprised by.
Okay.
Hopefully in sports cars next year. But I've actually been really wanting to drive a sprint car here for a long time. So maybe I'll just put together a little sprint car ride or something. So
Okay.
that would be cool.
Well, I'm guessing that you might know somebody that has, I don't know, an old Indy car lying around that you could maybe put a cage in. And there was somebody that ran one of those, a modified Indy car for a couple of years.
Yeah, a Pikes Peak.
Yep.
Yeah, hopefully I'll just get in faster and faster things going up Pikes Peak. The Cayman GT4 was an incredible place to start. It was just such a good platform to have as your rookie year. Because again, it was a spec class. So everybody was pretty similar. We can compare notes pretty exact. And the car is just handles so well. So to have a car that's that well handling on the mountain is really confidence inspiring.
Yeah, for sure. Porsches have been such a dominant car up there in the sports car class. I think that's definitely a good place to be. Hopefully at some point we'll have a Subaru that will take the fight to them. But
yeah.
one step at a time. Maybe a
you
couple
know,
Subarus, right, Sussex?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to see all different kinds of cars up there. It really is.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Well, Loni, thanks again so much for your time. Thanks for chatting with us. Really appreciate you coming on and being a guest. And yeah, just we'll keep an eye out and see what happens next year. And hopefully we'll see you up on Pikes Peak.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Really appreciate your support as always. And until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning. Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatirons.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.